Right, hello everyone. Welcome to AndyDavo's race guide for Goblins. Unfortunately, I know nothing about Goblins, so I've gone and enlisted the help of one of the most famous Goblin players out there, Mr. Yudlugar, to help me write this. Yud, tell me about you and playing Goblins. What do you know about Gobs?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. So I am pretty much an exclusive Goblin player. I probably started, well, maybe 6 years ago or something now, and I guess I've racked up a lot of games. At one point, I did keep count. It's certainly in the thousands, but I don't know exactly how many. Yeah, I play in most forms. So I play tabletop, I play Fumble, I play Blood Bowl 2, or did, and now I play Blood Bowl 3, having not been around for a little while. So. I've got quite a lot of experience within the new rule set because I've been playing on Fumble and playing tabletop. I think since they've changed the new rules, probably the bigger percentage of the games is in Blood Bowl 2, but I've played enough of the new rules to understand the changes, and really a lot of the concepts are still the same. There's minor differences, but I guess we'll get on to that.
Yes, so you've played, you say, a couple of thousand games. What was roughly is your win rate? Are you one of the highest win rate coaches, or have you won stuff with Goblins?
So tabletop, it's 60%, I think, from 100 odd games. I've got 5 wins in tabletop tournaments. I've got a lot of stunty cups, but I'm probably at the point where I'm more interested in trying to win a tournament than win a stunty cup. Fumble, I think Fumble Black Box, I'm 60% win rate. I think I'm the top ranked Goblin coach on Fumble if you put any weight in coach ranking on Fumble, which I know a lot of people don't, but I think I'm the only one who's made it into the Megastar category if you pay attention to Fumble. Like on Blood Bowl 2, I think I wasn't at the top. I was maybe like top 10-ish. I was like low 50s maybe. Obviously I played a lot of games, but also that's like historic, right? Like it's a lot of that was me learning and not being that good.
Yeah.
So I think in Blood Bowl 3 I did get up to like 70% from the first like 50-60 games. I've had a bit of a dwarf problem in the last couple of days, so it's dropped back a little bit. But
so to contextualize that, your win rate at 60% with Goblins is good players playing normal teams, non-stunty teams. A good win rate is 60%. The very top end is low 70s. So you're achieving with the team that has in NAF stats, what is it, about 35-40% normal win rate, and you're getting 60% out of it. You're squeezing an awful lot more. So that's the caliber of coach I've gone and fetched onto this to try and explain what's going on. Right, Yud absolutely knows what he's doing. As he mentioned, he's just come back, and you do have your own Twitch stream now. So we'll put a link to that in the description. So if you want to go and watch someone who's absolutely amazing play Goblins, you can do. Ruff, do you have a stream schedule or anything like that at all?
No, so like it's whether I'm actually going to keep streaming or not, I've no idea. Like I'm enjoying it at the moment, right? I haven't streamed for a couple of years. Once Blood Bowl 2 kind of died off, I stopped, and while I'm keeping enjoying it, I'll keep doing it. And probably I play something like 50% of my games on stream, I would say, as a rough guess. And I'm in the UK, so it's mostly weekday evenings and I quite like a weekend morning stream. That's probably a good time to catch me, I would say.
Monster, get out of bed in the morning to play Blood Bowl, you monster. Right, let's introduce the player types. So I'm going to let you talk through this if that's okay.
Sure.
And just what do they do? When should you be using them, and how many should you buy? What? Give us an overview.
Yeah. So the trolls, you get 2 of them. I won't do the skills in order because I'm not totally sure what all the symbols are, but they come with a couple of negatraits. So they've got really stupid, which means you need a 2+ to activate them as long as you have a non-really stupid player next to them, or 4+ if they're on their own. The Loner is now a 3+, which is a change from Blood Bowl 2. It used to be a 4+, so you can slightly more reliably reroll them, and there certainly are cases where it's a much stronger the consideration than it otherwise would be. The other change is projectile vomit, which is a bit like stab, but you need to roll a 2+ first. So on a 1, you vomit on yourself. This can't be a turnover, so this is pretty nice at like a turn 8 before you score. You get a couple of free armor rolls, which is pretty good. And it's also really good in other stunty matches. So, like, if you're playing Snotlings or Ogres with Noblars, the projectile vomit is a pretty nice way of dealing with them until you get block.
Right, okay. Any other standout skills on here?
So, Throw Teammate obviously is a stunty classic. It's always there. The Always Hungry relates to that. So before you throw Teammate, you have to roll another 2+, which is different to what, say, like a Halfling Treeman doesn't have to do this, but there's a risk you can kill your own Goblin by eating it. And then the regen is really important because these are your tanks, effectively. Your Trolls are going to take a lot of hits. The regen is pretty helpful for them, to be fair. Not that it ever works, of course.
It's fate skill. Okay. Hooligans.
Yeah, so Hooligans are a new player to Blood Bowl 2 players. They were around in the 2016 rule set that came between them. But the big news is rostered dirty player. So Goblins obviously lean heavily into a fouling game. You get plenty of bribes, don't you, and that kind of thing. They're cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And so having dirty player right off the bat is really, really helpful for some of those early games. And obviously anyone who's been playing Blood Bowl 3 will have come across dirty player Sneaky Git, and because you get Sneaky Git on agility access that they can take as a primary, you're effectively 2 touchdowns away from a Sneaky Git dirty player, and that's finished. So the Hooligan is now, somebody like Jimmy Fantastic will often say, one of the best players in Blood Bowl, and he's probably not wrong by that. The other aspect here is disturbing presence, though, because that can be, it's the sort of thing that people might not always pick up on, and you can use it kind of effectively. And so something like, if you've got a bomber on your roster, you can go and stick the disturbing presence somewhere near it before you throw the bomb, and then there's a -1 to all the people trying to catch it and pass it back to you.
Right, okay. And then it's got the normal skills, which I guess...
Yeah. So everything else is a regular Goblin. I guess maybe we should have done the regular Goblin first. But yeah. So the dodge Hooligan. So the stunty skill effectively means that you ignore tackle zones when you're dodging. So you still have to dodge, but you don't get the modifiers for it. Now, it used to be secret weapons. Now the wording in the skill is bombers. I think it might be bombardiers, chainsaws, and swoop. Don't get to ignore the modifiers. So effectively, you can't just dodge into a cage with a chainsaw and a 3+. You have to count the tackle zones. But this player can. It can still stunty dodge, which can be helpful to get to tricky places to foul. It also means they get injured more easily. So there's a new stunty casualty table, but it's effectively you get +1 to the injury roll. So a badly hurt on a 9 and a KO on a 7.
Yeah.
Right stuff means he can be thrown, so he can be thrown as well. Often you would want to, I don't think, but sometimes needs must.
Yeah. So even with a big sound blaster on his back, he still gets thrown the same as a regular Goblin.
Exactly.
Okay. Right. Pogo.
Yeah. So a Pogoer can't be thrown. They don't have the right stuff skill, but the Pogo skill. So the description here is wrong. So the description of Pogo stick that we can see in our bottom right is the description of the leap skill. The description of the Pogo stick is it ignores all modifiers when leaping. So it goes anywhere you can leap effectively 2 squares away. You don't have to jump over a prone player. You can do it anytime you like, and you get to do it on a 3+.
Mm-hmm.
So quite often dodging is still better because you have the built-in reroll for it. But there's certainly cases where you might be in tackle. It's a nice way to get away from diving tackle. You can't use diving tackle when you do it. You can't use prehensile tail. gets rid of all the modifiers, but also you can get over like solid walls, right? If there's no way through, you just hop over it.
Yeah. And you say it's a natural agility roll, so assuming therefore that because they start on Edge 3, if this Edge stat got improved, then the leap skill would get better.
Yeah, exactly. So if you can get a Pogo to agility 2+, it can effectively go anywhere it wants on a 2+. You're pretty much always avoiding a snake away from scoring if you can get it in range. So once you can get it that agility skill, it becomes a really threatening ball carrier.
And how many times can you leap with the Pogo skill per turn?
Once per activation.
Yeah.
But of course you then just have 2+ dodges to make as well.
Now, Doom Diver. This came up when we were setting everything up quite a lot. So what do you think about the Doom Diver? Any good?
I barely think it's worth talking about. My advice would just be pretend it doesn't exist. I guess we can cover it briefly because one thing is people like the model, right? It's quite a cool model. It looks nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If that's something you care about, then you can still take them, and there are things that it can do. So in 2016 rules, they were kind of okay. I still didn't take one, but there were certainly like good Goblin coaches that thought it was worth taking. In the new rules, I'm not really sure it is. So there's a few issues. One is the stunty dodging it can't do. So if you're going through tackle zones, you have to apply the modifiers. It doesn't start with dodge, and it's more expensive, right? It's 60k.
Okay.
So then the question is, how good is swoop? And they've made it worse. It used to be pretty good. It used to be that you got to do the inaccurate scatter from the throw teammate the same way you would move a fanatic. So each of the 3 scatters, you would put the throw-in template down and point it the way you want to go. So you could guarantee that you go 3 squares forwards.
Yeah.
Which effectively meant that you could move it first and then throw it straight into the end zone, which is quite a nice little trick, really. And it can be pretty good on the one turn because you can have him halfway in your half and then run him forwards.
Yeah.
Now they've changed it so that the skill description says you choose the scatter direction, which is pretty true, but it's now a D3 direction and a D3 distance. So effectively, you can't control exactly how far it goes, and it's a bit more unreliable. So you also used to get +1 to a landing with swoop, which you don't get anymore.
Wow. So it sounds like it's got an awful lot of downside and very little upside. And I guess you're talking about the costing being a lot, and it doesn't come with a core skill. So if someone backlines, doesn't have the ability to stunty dodge through on a 3, it would be a 4 or even worse, a 5+ dodge. It's expensive. I can see why you don't like it. Yeah.
So it's difficult to use it as a ball carrier in regular play because you don't have the stunty dodges, and quite often you will have to make some crazy plays where you're going through 2 or 3 tackle zones with your ball carrier. If you've got it as a handoff threat on your offense, well, it's the same kind of issue, right? It can't keep up with the rest of the players.
Sure.
For the one turn, it's pretty easy to neutralize. It does mean that it makes the regular one turn a little bit easier if they do go all the way back with it. But I think, like, my view is I would rather have a Goblin with catch. It's more threatening the rest of the game. So the main use, in my view, is as a defensive missile, as a throw teammate. So you can kind of put it at the edge of a cage and point it so one of the directions is going over the X of the cage. Yeah. So your D3 distance will hit one of the cage corners or the ball carrier if you've got a traditional X cage. So you're effectively a 1 in 3 to do something much.
Right.
That can be quite good. That's the sort of play that, to me, that becomes a bit of a last resort. You're quite likely to kill your player doing that. And if you're quite likely to kill your player, it's difficult enough to keep your team alive anyway without throwing goblins with the aim of deliberately hitting things that gives you an armor roll on your own player. it's a questionable tactic, I would suggest.
Okay, so it's a cool model, but it's overcosted. It doesn't have the right skill set, and Stunty doesn't work with it broadly.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's rubbish.
It's rubbish.
To summarise in one word.
Yeah. Right. We'll cover the linemen because then you've got this. The reason to play goblins is down here. So goblin lineman.
Yeah. So this is the hooligan, but regular goblin.
Yep.
So like compared to other stunties, they're not too bad. They're a bit faster than halflings. The armor's a bit higher. Your 3+ agility. The 4+ passing, it isn't impossible. Like, it can be a thing that you can do. You don't want to, but it's something that's there. The main issue with goblins, like other stunties, is the skill access. So because they only can access agility on primary, there's not that many skills that you want to take with them.
Right.
So effectively, your goblins are trying to keep the key players safe. That's what they're doing. So they die a lot.
Fair enough, and they don't get to level up very much. So actually, they are just as you see them here most of the time.
Yeah, most commonly you'll have maybe 8 to 11 of these players on a roster, depending exactly what's going on, and most of them will just be like this.
Okay. Right, the fun stuff. Chainsaw.
Yeah, so the chainsaw for me is the best player on the roster. Everyone will agree with me, but and I know a lot of people are a bit kind of wary about chainsaws generally. Like you don't see a lot of teams taking chainsaw stars, for example, in regular play, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the big difference here is that this one doesn't have loner, so you can re-roll the kickback. So how a chainsaw works is instead of doing a block action, you can take a chainsaw action. You roll a 2+, and as long as you don't roll a 1. Then you get to do an armor roll on the opponent, and you can add 3 to it. So it's amazing at dealing with things like Elves and Skaven, where there's lots of blodge everywhere, but it's low armor.
Yep.
Against the higher armor teams, you have to be a bit more nuanced, and you have to pick your opportunities a little better of when to use it. But it's still a pretty good option of if you're trying to get removals against an armor 10+ team, for example, the chainsaw is still a pretty good way to do it. You just have to make sure that you're making safe chainsaw hits that we'll maybe get to a little later.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other aspect of it is the secret weapon. So it gets sent off after a drive, and you do get access to cheap bribes with goblins. So a big part of playing goblins successfully is making sure that you're managing your secret weapons and your bribes correctly throughout the game. Like your general game management of always being aware of how many players you have is very important, particularly on such a foul-heavy team, because there's points where you need to stop fouling because getting another player sent off is very bad for you if you have to start fielding weapons and using up your bribes and so on and so on.
Okay.
There's two primary uses for the chainsaw, because you not only can you do what we talked about with instead of a block action, you can also do a chainsaw foul where you foul a piece and add 3 to it. You can effectively use it either as a blitzer or as a fouler. My personal view is it's used as a blitzer. I'll pretty much only ever foul with it if it's to late in the half and it's going to get sent off anyway. Then I might throw in some fouls. Or if I absolutely have to break armor and make sure the foul works, the +3 might be used in that kind of thing. But this is effectively the blitzer on the team, is my view.
Right. Okay. And we've got the fouler because we talked about the hooligan, and the hooligan does the fouling job. This is the blitzer, right? And we've got the 2 tanks. We've got the cannon fodder, which are the goblins. So we've got 2 left. We're going to do the fanatic next, if that's okay, and then we'll save the bomber because, for reasons.
Sure. So the fanatic, ball and chain, no hands, secret weapon again, and stunty. Now he's a strength 7 player, but if he ever gets knocked over, he's automatically at least KO'd. So effectively, you do a straight injury roll, and it's at least a KO. Now, the ball and chain skill is bigger than what's written there. Like, the description of it has several paragraphs in the rulebook. So I would recommend going to read the full thing rather than just the tooltip here. For people who've played Goblins before in Blood Bowl 2, for example, there's a couple of pretty key changes. So the first one is that you don't have to use the movement anymore, all the movement. In the old rules, if you had a movement 3 fanatic, it had to move 3 squares every time you activated it. Now, if you go 1 and get to the square you want to be in, you can stop.
Right, okay.
The other change is that if you move onto the ball, it's not a turnover anymore. There's the wording in the skill becomes it's considered to move involuntarily, and therefore it's not a turnover. You just scatter the ball.
That's different to, for example, a necromantic wraith, which also has no hands, because if you move that and pass that through the ball, that is a turnover, because it doesn't have that wording.
That bit of the rule is in the ball and chain description, not in the no hands description.
Right, yeah, okay.
Now, that's a bigger change than it might sound, to be honest. That's a really helpful one. It used to be, because the way, for me, that, like, your fanatic is one of two things. It's either we're going full into we're trying to kill as much as we can goblin thing, and the fanatic is just trying to more into the other team. You're throwing as many go for it's and armor rolls and everything you can until it dies, and you're trying to move things. Or it becomes, with the trolls, part of your positioning, and you're not really trying to hit things with it. You're trying to, like, control the space. And with the fanatic and the 2 trolls, you actually have a bit of a, strength wall that you can kind of keep players safe behind. There's a world, right, where in your inducements you pick up Barag, Ripper, Morg, whatever, and Fungus, and then all of a sudden you've got 5 strength 5 upwards players that are sort of a wall coming forwards.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of players would just run away from that, and that can make your offense pretty comfortable, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, without diverting off to as someone who plays normal teams, as the other side of the fence, I know that when I see a couple of inducements, which are the high strength stuff, that's a right problem, and you have to go and try and get round the back and try and challenge them that way. You can't stand in front of them; you just get mowed down.
But the other really useful aspect of the fanatic, and we'll come on to this when we talk about the bomber as well, because my view is you can only really take 2 secret weapons.
Ooh.
It's definitely not the only view. There's definitely many competent and good players that do, but my view is it's better to run 2 weapons.
Okay.
But effectively, if you're playing something like an elf team or something that's going to come and pressure you, so you don't really have the tools to fight back, right? If all of your goblins are based at the start of your turn, you've got a problem to solve, and often there'll be 2 or 3 players are on the ball carrier. Sometimes they might all have tackle and this kind of thing. Being able to run the fanatic into your own players to try and move them around or to clear the ball out, particularly, right, let's say an elf has cage dive and put the ball on the ground, it stood 3 players around it. Being able to just run the fanatic into it and maybe scatter the ball is really good. So that change about the ball scattering is pretty important, was what I was trying to say before we went off on a bit of a diversion.
Yeah. Okay, so useful player, this one. This one, unlike the Doom Diver, you're taking this. Okay.
For sure.
Right. And then the last one is the bomber.
So in one of the recent FAQs, they gave bombers passing access on primary, which they never used to have.
Yep.
So this now opens up quite a lot of development opportunities with them that you never used to have. But effectively, the bombardier skill means you can throw a bomb like you would a ball, and it can blow up their team. It can also blow up your team, and it's a bit of a reroll and turnover magnet, as is the chainsaw, and to an extent, so is the fanatic. So, I think if you're going to play with a bomber, it's primarily for your defensive drive, and it's a big threat, right?
Yeah.
And I think there are certainly like tactical things about playing goblins, and it's about percentages, right? What's the most probable way that you're going to win this match? And in quite a lot of those scenarios, the answer might be the bomber works really well, blows up everything, and we go and get the ball. One of the reasons that I don't take a bomber, and we'll come on to that in the rosters that we've prepared and so on, is that Bomber Dribble Snot is such a good player, right?
Yeah.
So a bomber costs 45k. For 5k more, you can induce Bomber Dribble Snot. He comes with accurate, and he comes with a special rule that means you can stop the player catching it. Like, you're guaranteed to just blow the player up.
Isn't he also better at passing? Because I noticed these pass on a 4+. Does Bomber pass on a 3?
So he has 3+ passing, yes.
And accurate. So he passes on a 2+ in the short first pass banding, 3+ in the second pass banding. This guy is a 4 in the 5. I mean, that's a considerable change, even though Bomber has a loner.
Yeah. So you're quite, like, effectively with Bomber, you have to avoid rolling a 1.
Yeah.
Whereas with this guy, you have a couple of issues, because it's pretty rare somebody's going to come and be where you can throw a quick pass, right? It's pretty rare you get the +0 modifier, unless things are basing it and you're trying to throw it like directly over their head to the square next to it. But it's pretty rare somebody's going to put a cage like 2 squares from your bomber. Generally, you're going to have at least a -1. You might even have a tackle zone or something on you. You might even be throwing at a -2 range. And the problem is the wildly inaccurate. You can kind of do as much damage to your own team as you can yourself. I think if you're going to lean into the bomber, you kind of have to do it at the start of your turn, right? You generally will have 11 players for like a turn of the game, but, you know, after 2 or 3, you probably don't.
Yep.
And so it's no good knocking the ball carrier over with a bomb if you can't then both get the ball and secure it.
Yeah.
It's got to go first, because everything else has to then go and do something if it works.
Yeah.
Unless you're just using it for attrition. So there is a world where at the end of every turn, I throw a bomb at something in the hope that I kill it.
Right.
You know, and that can work, right? Goblins are not good. If your coaching level is similar, and arguably you should lean towards a high variance dice roll-y kind of thing.
Yep.
Like, you should play into the swinginess.
So they're just not strong enough, is I guess what you're saying. So the passing act is not good enough, and the downside is too dangerous.
Exactly. And like, I'm not the only person who plays goblins well. There's lots of different very good goblin coaches, and some of them play in a completely different style to how I do. I roll a lot of dice, right? If you play against me, you can get pretty tilted, because I'm not afraid to, like, oh, there's 5 dodges, let's do them all. Like, you know, I'm not very conservative in how I play, and so there are versions in which you can be a bit safer. But I kind of take the approach that if the dice don't work, if I have bad dice, I'm gonna lose. Like, I can't mitigate bad dice. My team wins by me both rolling well as playing well. My kind of like concept of playing goblins is I assume things are going to work, which is totally backwards, right? If you ask anyone, how do I get better at playing Blood Bowl, right? The answer will invariably be, look at the fail state, think about how things could go wrong, and try and mitigate it, and try and do that sort of thing. And my opinion on goblins is throw that out the window. Assume everything's going to work to an extent. You know, obviously every rule is there to be broken, but to an extent, just assume you're not going to snake things. Assume you're going to kill everything. Make the outcome of, if you do that, make the outcome of that really good. Because what goblins are good at is snowballing. What goblins are good at is, once I have a 3-player advantage, is getting rid of the other 7. That kind of thing, you know?
Yeah. Okay. So, bombers.
I was not talking about bombers at all.
No, that was general gameplay advice, but it's still very useful nonetheless. And
what I was sort of talking about is that I still think that bit of, if you've got a bomber, you've got to use it early. And quite often with goblins, a lot of things will be based, right? A lot of players will base a lot of your team. So if you have an early fail, it's pretty bad, because, you know, you might lose 4 players. It's very swingy, is what I'm getting at.
Right, so that's introducing all the players. the next thing to do is look about how on earth you would then turn those individual players into a cohesive unit or a roster. And so we've prepared 2 rosters for Blood Bowl 3 type gameplay, and then we've taken and built another one, or I say we've created another one which is for NAF style tournament. So I guess this is you said this was more like league based, and the idea was that you needed to win.
Trying to be as competitive as I can be from game one.
Okay.
So, like something like Black Box Trophy on Fumble, I would use this. If I was joining a league where I want to win this league, I would use this. This is also what I take on the ladder. Like if I'm starting a ladder, I would take this as well. There's a caveat here of if you press the manage team button, we have this TV thing, right?
Yep.
So if we want to, we can set us to matchmake at plus 600 TV, and then we can guarantee that we're going to be able to take 2 stars every game, more or less. In which case, you probably want to drop to 14 players because you need the 2 spaces for stars. Now,
where would you set this?
At the moment, my team has it at plus 400, but that's because I've played a lot of games already, and if I don't have it set quite high, it takes forever to find a game because it's trying to find somebody at like 1,000 TV who's played lots of games. If it's a fresh team, I would probably set it at 0 or plus 50.
Oh wow! Okay. So you want to play against other fresh teams?
There's a bunch of fresh teams that Goblins are pretty good against. The problem is as you start playing higher and higher teams, you start to run into more Mighty Blow, you start to run into more Tackle, and you've got a good chance of just everything dying, right? Especially in a league environment. Like avoiding the death spiral is pretty important with Goblins, and it's not that easy. So if you can choose to play fresh teams that don't have any Mighty Blow, I would do so.
Okay. Notice here that you've only taken 2 star players, and we haven't got all the other positionals. So where's the other positionals, and why have we only got 2 stars?
So this comes down to secret weapon and bribe management, effectively. So what you have with Goblins, which is different to the other stunty teams, is you have a bit of a bench, but you don't really have a big one. So in this roster, I'm recommending that we take 15 players.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty common that we'll take 14 players, and we'll look at that in the next one. But in essence, is particularly if I have to go on defense first, I don't really want the Fanatic on my defense. He is actually not that bad on defense. It's just I want to make sure I have him on the offense because he's better at that.
Yep.
But, if I have to use him on defense, it's not like he's better than a Goblin would be. He's just not as good as on offense. And so what I effectively need is if my opponent does a 7-turn or an 8-turn drive, is I need to be able to put my weapons on the bench when I set up on my turn 8 so that I don't have to bribe them. Generally you'll lose, on average, you'll lose 2 to 3 Goblins, just even against a fresh team, right? In the bad case, you'll lose 10, and it's not unusual to be down 4 or 5 players. So what I'm trying to do is giving myself the best chance of having a full team for at least at the start of every drive of the game, right? So in the second half, I want to be setting up 11 players, and ideally I want to be setting up some weapons still as well. As you play more Goblins, you'll start to get used to how to do the offense, and that's the easy part. The easy part of Goblins is I win the toss, I get the ball, I remove 2 players on the line of scrimmage, I do a bit more damage, I crawl up the field and I score, and I'm 1-0 up, it's my turn 8, hey, everything's fine. And then a couple of weapons get sent off, and then the opponent gets to hit 2 lines of scrimmage, and then it's like turn 11, and all of a sudden I've got 6 players, and they score, and then I have to try and do something with 6 players on the pitch against a full team, or against 10 players, who are all better than mine, and then they score again, and then I've lost. And so, I've had games that I've pitch cleared the opponent in the first half, and I've lost it because they all came back from the KOs, and my players were all cased.
So the idea here is to say it's 2 and 10 versus 3 and 9, because actually the 3 you have to then bribe all 3, not just 2, and you've got less of an overall bench to fall back on. So that's why you're going for the not 3. And you didn't like the bomber in the preview, so why take a third?
No, I'm not. By no means is the bomber a bad player. Like, the bomber's really good. The problem for me is the 3 secret weapons, because you kind of want to leave the room for the star players.
Yeah.
And this comes down to like where you're setting your TV matchmaking. If I know I'm going to be getting 400-500k of inducements every time, then I'm only going to run 4 players so that I can take 2 stars. But effectively, I want at least 2 non-secret weapons as a bench, ideally 3.
Right. Okay.
That's kind of my view of mitigating the loss state of my team just dies. Is trying to run a deep bench whilst also trying to have some tools with the secret weapons. Because you could just not take any weapons and have 16 goblins and then be, yeah, cool, now I'm going to have a full team the whole game. But, the weapons are the reason you're playing goblins, isn't it? It doesn't totally sit right.
That's League. Is there any variants you want to talk out or anything?
Yeah,
because I know we've got another roster to look at, but is there anything on here it's this or that as an option?
Exactly. So there's a few questions. There's a few things here, right? You could take a third reroll. We've got 75k in the bank.
Yeah.
I like playing 3 reroll goblins. I don't like playing 2 reroll goblins. So there's a few issues with the rerolls. The first is when you're defending, you ideally want to keep as many rerolls as you can for the 1 turn. So in Blood Bowl 2, you get 1 reroll a turn. You would keep 1 reroll for the 1 turn, so that means you get 1 reroll for your defensive drive. Arguably, with multiple returns a turn, you keep both of them for your 1 turn, right? With like the percentage increase of using 1 reroll to 2 rerolls and making a 1 turn work is quite significant.
Yeah.
With 3, I might spend 1 of them in the defensive drive, and depending how it's going, I might then decide I'm going to keep 2 for the 1 turn. Ideally, I'd keep all 3 for the 1 turn. If I lose 4 players on turn 1, or if I lose a troll or something like that, I might just kind of think, well, at least I might have a shot at a draw, right? Or a win if I can pull off the 1 turn, if I've kept most of my team for my offense.
Yeah. Like,
what will happen a lot is if you try and play the defensive drive as if you're playing a team that's good at defending and can compete with your opponent, is you'll get your team murdered and you'll lose the game because your team's murdered. If you're trying to go and pressure the ball, that means you're taking lots of hits on goblins and that kind of thing. Also on your offense, right? Your chainsaw is on a 1. If you're playing 2 rerolls, there are times where you're just going to have to eat the loony kills itself. Or you have to stop using the loony. When you're doing your offensive drive, it's so important to get the ball early. You can't mess about with picking the ball up. The times where I don't re-roll a pickup are very, very few, because stabilizing the drive as quickly as possible, getting all the team together in the middle of the field is so crucial that you just have to use the re-rolls on the pickup. So 2 is really light, but the benefit is the TV management, right? I'm getting a bit of inducement money. I can take dribble snort, I can take a bribe, and so on and so on.
Is there anything here that you could cut? So you've got the third reroll, but you would drop. I don't suggest maybe a troll, but is it the fanatic or the loony or something like that? Would you trade out for a third reroll for this?
You could drop a goblin, right? You could go to 14 players and take a reroll, something like that.
Is that reasonable or is that craziness?
Yeah. So it's a bit of a you basically play more conservatively with 2 rerolls, so you have to lean back a little bit, but I'll pretty much eventually I'll try and buy the third reroll when I get there. The other question is the pogo. So I really like the pogo as a ball carrier. I never used one in Blood Bowl 2, but now that the skill development is different, the problem with the pogo was, because it's the player you're scoring on, is its skill access is rubbish. So effectively, unless you roll a double on it, you have to fire it and get a new one. And because they're 70k, that's quite hard to do every time you score 2 touchdowns in a game. So Now that you can save up and you can guarantee that you're getting block and sure hands and stats and so on and so on and so on, the Pogo is now a really, really good player. The only reason I don't put one in the starting lineup is because I want to score on the Hooligan to get it to Sneaky Git as soon as I can.
Right.
So the Hooligan is my ball carrier until it's scored twice. I don't foul with it. It just the number one priority is get the Hooligan Sneaky Git as quickly as I can.
And then you would replace a Goblin maybe for the Pogo?
Yeah. So either something has died, or I start like randoming things, or I just fire something. That's kind of the general logic behind this starting roster. Is you've got enough players, and part of the other reason for going to 15. You asked me a question when we were chatting before this about the dedicated fans, and I know a few people who will take the fans. My view is I need the money. Like what I don't want is to have 4 Goblins die, or even some miss next games, right? Because you can't play Goblins if you start dropping to 11, 12. If you have like 11 players and 2 of them are weapons, you're not gonna, unless you have like the best game of your life. That's a loss just out of the bat, because you don't stay alive in that matchup.
At that point, would you then consider dropping the TV range down to +0? So if you're spinning off 800, you actually want to play into another 800 team. That's probably going to be another stunty. So therefore, if you're going to have any chance, it's a stunty team.
No.
Or you want to
pretty
go
much
up?
no, because a stunty team is just going to have more play. 800, right? Halflings are going to take your rerolls.
Oh
probably.
dear, yeah, it's going to be horrible.
They're going to have a bench, and they're just going to knock things over and foul you until you've got nothing left.
So you want to go up. So if you get down to the point where Death Spiral is a problem, you go manage TV and you go up.
You go up, and you take. I mean, you probably take in some mercenary goblins as well, right? But you take some stars and you try and get that bench. But
okay, there you go. That's not counterintuitive almost, but that's what you do. Right. Let's look at the second roster. What was this one built for? Was this ladder?
No, I mean,
like
they're both pretty flexible for using in most things, but effectively this is what I would say is the other option. We're kind of putting the two extremes in. There's lots of little variations between these two that you can do with this, but effectively we've taken all 3 weapons and we've dropped to 14 players. This is I'm going to play against bigger teams to an extent, so I think I'm going to be playing bigger teams. So I've kept 2 spaces so I can get 2 star players.
Yep.
One of those star players is going to be a Ripper, a Varag, a Morg. So I've got a better chance of staying alive because one of the players on the pitch is not a Goblin. It's a big strength. It might have regen. It's less likely to die. I can keep everything else a bit better protected. I'm probably going to have some bribes, so I'm more likely for my weapons to play more than one drive.
Yeah.
This is a bit kind of like leaning into the getting inducements in those first games. That's kind of what we.
So where would you set the matchmaking TV in this sort of thing? Are you looking at down at 300? Are you going more or?
So I would say this is where you're joining a developed league with a Goblin team, because if you're a rookie team and you set your TV to 600, for example, matchmaking, right? It's looking for another rookie team that's 1600.
Yeah.
Like
yes.
The number of games you've played is relevant as far as I'm aware.
It is, yeah. MPR.
So all that happens if you put this team in the ladder with no games and put plus 600, what will happen is it'll take you a very long time to find a game, and then it'll either be a mega developed team that's played lots of games, or it'll just be another rookie team that it just took you longer to find.
Yes.
I want to play the game, so I'm using this matchmaking thing to make my spin quicker, not to make the matchup more favourable.
Right, okay. But would it be reasonable to add, I don't know, because the MPR value, the matches played ranking, is done in bandings. They've not published the exact formula. Even I don't know the formula. I'm not privy to any information other than it will put you into groups. So let's say it's like 0 to 10. So it is possible to probably have a TV of 1200.
Oh, for sure.
So
Yeah.
That's reasonable. That you're right. The 600 TV plus is unreasonable.
What you kind of want as a minimum with this roster is you want Ripper is 250,
Yeah.
You probably want a couple of bribes is 350, and then you want bomber dribble snot. So you're looking for about 400 as a minimum.
So
That's kind of like you want 400k of inducements, ideally a little bit more.
Right, so you'd be putting it into this branding here, and a fresh team might struggle to get that. If this team looked like this, and it's more 5 games played, 10 games played, or as you say, jumping into a developed league where this isn't actually a thing because it's not matchmaking, it's a league, then fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll set that at there, plus 300. 300 to 400 is where you might set that.
We've kind of done the same thing, right? Is we've taken the hooligan to carry the ball first. Yep. We've set the TV to 890 so that we can, even if we're playing a fresh team, we have a couple of bribes because we've got the 3 weapons. Getting the bribes is more important. Like if I'm spinning this into a team that's evenly matched on TV and I don't get any bribes, it's more of a problem. You could still take the pogo first, right? But I think you probably want to keep the TV lower when you're doing this kind of thing.
Okay. So hooligan first, level it up, then bring the pogo in. Same for the last roster. Yeah. That's the general strategy.
Again, you could bang a third reroll on this, right? Like if you've never played Goblins before, my general advice would be do something like this, but with 3 rerolls, because even if you're listening to me and thinking, well, Yudlugar doesn't take a bomber, neither should I. You should, because you need to learn how to use it. You know, still play with bombers sometimes, and being able to use all of these things is still worth learning, right? So if you're learning Goblins, take 3 rerolls because you're gonna need them. They're a reroll heavy team, and take all the weapons as well, you know. But from a point of view of played some Goblins, how do I start swinging the competitive edge my way? I would lean more to the first roster.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. So you mentioned in the intro about you go and play a lot of NAF style tabletop Blood Bowl. So you've gone and built us a roster for that type of environment, so you can take this and go and play it in the real world. What's the idea here? We haven't put the skills on. Why have we not put the skills on? And what's this roster trying to achieve?
Yeah, so because of the way rule sets work in NAF stuff generally, is the skills can be quite different. So I thought it'd be easier to just talk through what the skills could be. Because they have custom teams, right? There are some NAF formats on Blood Bowl 3 as well, so it could be relevant to both. But this is my general tabletop roster. So this is an 1150 team, so I would take 3 bribes with this to go to 1150.
Okay.
And this is generally the bones of it. I'll vary it a little bit depending on the rule set, but effectively I want as many players as I can get for the same reason that I don't want to lose by just having all my players die. I've got my pogo as the ball carrier, the hooligan as the fouler. I've got my 2 weapons. Now, there's a pretty reasonable argument to fit a bomber in here as well. Part of the reason I go this route is the maths work, right? This is a nice round number. I'm not leaving any TV on the table. The 2 rerolls in NAF format, I think you really want 3, so I will take a leader and I will put it on a troll.
Okay.
As one of the rerolls. I have played 2 block trolls and 2 rerolls instead, and it is okay. It's certainly viable. It's not like you don't do it ever. It's pretty good, to be fair, but my personal view is the leader troll is a better way to go.
Mm-hmm.
So the variant with the bomber is effectively you swap a goblin for a bomber, but it means that you can't have 16 players then. So you're playing 15 and you're putting in 3 weapons, or you're dropping something else, right? You're dropping bribes. But then you have the same issue of I've got three weapons and I've got less bribes. So if you have 1,200 to build to, I quite like taking a third reroll.
Okay.
In which case, I'm dropping either the hooligans getting dropped and I'm just taking dirty player as a skill. I'm dropping a 15 players, or I'm dropping a bribe. One of those things.
It's a compromise. So there's a compromise somewhere. It's just what flavour of compromise you're putting in there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sure.
So I think this is the nicest balance of all of the various factors. But those kind of things, a little bit. It depends on your play style a little bit maybe. But I quite like a biased referee if I'm going to be if I'm in an environment where I think the meta is going to be foul heavy. then I really like a biased referee, because you don't want things fouling you as Goblins. Believe me.
Do you get a discount on that? Because it's normally 110k for a normal team.
Yeah, it's 130k for a normal team.
130.
Only 80 for Goblins.
Wow.
And maybe relevant to not relevant to NAF play, but my view is if you can afford it, 2 bribes and a biased referee is better than 3 bribes in my view.
Oh wow. Okay.
Like with how many rolls you get, the maths of a 1 on a bribe make, if you've got 3 bribes, the chances of one of them failing mean it's better to take a biased referee.
Yeah.
Even if the opponent isn't going to foul you. If the opponent's going to foul you, then that makes it even better, obviously. Like skill-wise with this, you get two versions of rule sets. One is you get lots of normal skills and 1 or 2 secondaries. One is you can kind of do what you want, and you get lots, like something like the Euroball rule set. So my Euroball team, they gave me 11 skill points with it, 2 for a secondary, but didn't limit them.
Yeah.
So I can get 5 secondaries and 1 normal. Great. I'll have a block troll, a leader troll. I'll have a block fanatic. I quite like a sure hands player in NAF. There's a lot of the bad matchup, things like elves and stuff that's going to have strip ball is like really rough. Like being able to avoid strip ball is pretty important, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm still like a bit stuck in the old ways where war dancers just meant you lost. Like
no, they still mean you lost now. They suck. Yeah,
the change to leap at least means sometimes they fall over, right? It used to be if you played Wood Elves and you didn't have sure hands, you lost, and Wood Elves were absolutely everywhere, right? So
yeah.
Maybe I'm still living in the past a little bit with the sure hands, but personally, I prefer a sure hands carrier to a block carrier.
Makes sense.
I also like a strip ball goblin. I remember at UKTC this year, we played Team W in the first round. And Pete looked over me as I'm playing, because they were all stunties, and I was playing the gnome player, I think. And Pete looked over me and he said something along the lines of, well, strip ball goblin's great against other stunties, but what about everything else? And I played 6 games with no sure hands on the other team the whole weekend.
Wow.
Maybe that's luck of the draw, right? But I kind of think that a lot of the teams that have sure hands are pretty good matchups for goblins, and a lot of the teams that don't have sure hands are fairly bad ones. So I kind of think the strip ball it helps in the games where you need it is what I would say.
So that you want rule sets where you're allowed to put as many secondaries as you can possibly stack on there, because actually skill access sucks and you need the secondaries.
So in the opposite rule set where you only get a few secondaries, I'll try and use all of the primary skills on the things that have good access to them. So the trolls take guard, the loony maybe dodge, the fanatic might have mighty blow, the hooligan gets sneaky git if you're allowed to do it, and then the doubles are used on the goblins. And again, it sure hand strip or whatever. I really like pro goblins, which I think is a stupid thing. Like I think this is me getting in my head that it's good because it worked once, but I still quite like a pro goblin. I'm not sure whether it's better than a block goblin. Probably not, but I think it opens up opportunities. So when you're defending as goblins, a lot of players won't fall for it, but a pretty effective defense is to leave the sideline open and try and get them down the sideline, and then try and push them towards the sideline so that they either go into the end zone or they go close enough to the edge so that you can try and either power them onto the edge where it might scatter off, or surf them directly if they're stupid enough to sideline cage against stunties. Mm-hmm. And you're almost always uphilling in that scenario. And if you are playing against sure hands, having a pro goblin that can reroll one of those dices is pretty good. Unfortunately, when you throw him, you can't reroll the landing because it's not an activation, but you can use it for dodging through the backline and go for it. If your ball carrier dies, he's a half-decent replacement ball carrier. So, he kind of becomes this sort of utility player who he does have a primary role, but then he also can function in different ways throughout the team.
Okay, that's interesting. That is interesting. So this is it's hugely rule set dependent, but that's the chassis you put on top of it.
Yeah. Everything will start from this and then be tweaked a little bit. Yeah. Sure.
Okay. Right. So that's the initial setups. Then we've got how you would actually then build the team from one of these initial rosters through a bunch of games.